Tin looked in and called Ganya. He hastily abandoned the prince and went out, though he had wanted to say something more, but was obviously hesitant and as if ashamed to begin, and he had also denounced the room as if from embarrassment. The prince had just managed to wash and to straighten his clothes a bit when the door opened again and a new figure appeared in it. This was a gentleman of about 30, rather tall, broad-shouldered, with an enormous, curly, red-haired head. His face was fleshy and ruddy, his lips thick, his nose broad and flattened, his eyes small, puffy, and jeering, as if constantly winking. The whole of it made a rather insolent picture. His clothes were on the dirty side. At first he opened the door just enough to thrust his head in. This thrust-in head surveyed the room for about 5 seconds, then the door slowly began to open, the whole figure was outlined on the threshold, but the visitor did not come in yet, but squinted and went on studying the prince from the threshold. Finally he closed the door behind him, approached, sat down on a chair, took the prince firmly by the hand and seated him in an angle to himself on the sofa. "Ferdyshchenko," he said, peering intently and questioningly into the prince's face. "What about it?" the prince replied, almost bursting into laughter. A tenant, Ferdyshchenko spoke again, peering in the same way. "You want to become acquainted?" said the visitor, ruffling up his hair and sighing, and he started looking into the opposite corner. "Do you have any money?" he asked suddenly, turning to the prince. "A little." "How much, precisely?" 25 rubles. "Show me." The prince took a 25-ruble note from his waistcoat pocket and handed it to Ferdyshchenko. The man unfolded it, looked at it, turned it over, then held it up to the light. "Quite strange," he said, as if pondering. "Why do they turn brown?" "These 25ers sometimes get terribly brown, while others, on the contrary, fade completely." "Take it." The prince took the note from him. Ferdyshchenko got up from the chair. "I came to warn you, first of all, don't lend me any money, because I'm sure to ask." "Very well. Do you intend to pay here?" "I do." "Well, I don't, thank you." "Mine's the first door to your right," Did you see? Try not to visit me too often, I'll come to you, don't worry about that. Have you seen the general? No. Heard him? Of course not. Well, you will see and hear him. Besides, he even asks me to lend him money. Avis Olektur goodbye. Is it possible to live with a name like Ferdishchenko? A? Warning to the reader. Why not? Goodbye. And he went to the door. The prince learned later that this gentleman, as if out of duty, had taken upon himself the task of amazing everyone by his originality and merriment, but it somehow never came off. He even made an unpleasant impression on some people, which caused him genuine grief, but all the same he would not abandon his task. In the doorway he managed to set things right, as it were, by bumping into a gentleman coming in, after letting this new gentleman, who was unknown to the prince, enter the room. He obligingly winked several times behind his back by way of warning, and thus left not without a certain aplomb. This new gentleman was tall, about 55 years old or even a little more, rather corpulent, with a purple-red, fleshy and flabby face framed by thick gray side whiskers, with a mustache and large, rather protruding eyes. His figure would have been rather imposing if there had not been something seedy, shabby, even soiled about it. He was dressed in an old frock coat with nearly worn through elbows, his shirt was also dirty, in a homey way. There was a slight smell of vodka in his vicinity, but his manner was showy, somewhat studied, and with an obvious wish to impress by its dignity. The gentleman approached the prince unhurriedly, with an affable smile, silently took his hand and, holding it in his own, peered into his face for some time, as if recognizing familiar features. Him, he said softly but solemnly. As if alive. I heard them repeating the familiar and dear name and recalled the irretrievable past, Prince Mishkin? That's right, sir. General Ivolgin, retired and unfortunate. Your name and patronymic, if I dare ask? Lev Nikolaevich. So,